I'm just a lawyer. What's been fun about my career, I didn't even necessarily want to become a lawyer. The reason I went to law school was the same reason that half the other people in my school went to law school. They really didn't know what else to do. But it's been a lot of fun being a lawyer, and part of the reason for that is I've had the opportunity to become involved in negotiations in a lot of different cultures, a lot of different contexts, a lot of different industries. I was originally trained in the US, but have spent my entire career abroad. I started practicing first in France and then in Belgium. So I've been able to negotiate different cultures, different languages, different legal systems, different industries. And that's fun because you're always learning. And I've probably made a lot of mistakes along the way, and that's probably the best way to learn in some ways. After that, I spent 10 years in Russia, which is, again, a very different culture, and learned a lot there. Looking back, when I started off, I was like, yeah, do I really want to be a lawyer? Boy, that sounds boring, But it's been a lot of fun. And I think the funnest part about it has been negotiation. And it is indeed the psychological element, and trying to, understand what you want and understand what the other side wants, and trying to come to terms. Anyway, it's been fun. I'm very happy you all are here, thanks to the panelists as well. I don't know that any particular negotiation comes to mind with regard to that, or with regard to some of the issues we've been talking about. I think I would go back to what Tim was talking about in terms of preparation, and how important that is. And I think one thing that was interesting about that clip is the fact that the other side offering a settlement did not seem prepared to react to what Julia Roberts had to say. And I think it's very important in preparation. Knowing the facts is essential, no question about that, and you really can't prepare enough in that sense. But you need to know, first of all, what you want, but you also need to know where you're willing to go. And it's really important to keep that in mind. And I think probably the most important piece of leverage you can have in any negotiation is knowing when you're ready to walk away. And I've been in too many negotiations where, whether it's my client or the other side, they're just not sure. And so I try to counsel my clients on figuring that out. Where's the breaking point? Where's the point where you say, you know what, sorry, I don't think we can come to a deal on this, and where it's going to go our separate ways. And that's an important thing to know, and you have to be very careful, because sometimes people say that and they don't really mean it, they're just bluffing. And you may say, well, we're done, I don't think we can do a deal. And the other side will say, okay, bye. And you're like, wait, no, we didn't really mean that. That's part of the art as well. That's part of the psychology. So in terms of preparation, it's gathering the facts, but it's also knowing where you want to get, knowing where you're willing to get, and not getting lost in the dynamics of the negotiation and losing sight of that. I think those are two great examples, because the toughest negotiations that I've been involved with are where you have very little leverage. And that's really, really tough. And if you can manage to get a decent deal when you have very little leverage, you've done very, very well for yourself. It's certainly, it's a more pleasant situation to be in when you have the leverage. It makes your life a lot easier. And when you don't have the leverage, you really sweat. That's so. It's obviously it's what those two men accomplished is incredible, and we're all just mere mortals. I like to think that I've been involved in some high pressure negotiations in my time. But when you talk about hostages or trying to negotiate on nuclear arms and things like that, it's makes me realize just how much out of my element I am, so it's hard for me to imagine what it would be like in that kind of situation. I guess the only thing that I can try to imagine myself in that situation based on my experience, is that, negotiations can happen. There's so much momentum, there's so much that goes on, and it can all happen very quickly. And I think that when I think back about some of the really great negotiators that I've had as clients, they're people who really know how to keep their cool. When everyone else is getting all worked up, getting all excited, getting angry, they're the ones who could just, they were all right. They didn't get wrapped up in it. They stayed focused on what it was they wanted and their end goals. And I think that's just because they didn't get caught up in things. They, sort of slowed themselves down. And I would think that in those kinds of high pressure situations, having that skill, it's essential, I would think. Yes. And one thing I'd like to add to that, again, when I think about some of the really great and experienced negotiators that I've had the pleasure of working with, I've been in situations where, my client will have all the leverage, and they can really, if they want to, they can just, sort of crush the counterparty. The counterparty has no alternative. They have to do the deal. They have to do it on my client's terms. And smart ones that I've worked with, they'll say, no, let's not be too hard on them. Let's give them, we'll get a deal that's good for us, but that's not too unfair to them. And that's smart, because as good of a contract as you can have, if the other side feels like they've just lost everything, you never want to be dealing with someone who feels like they have nothing more to lose, because that's a dangerous situation to be in. It's interesting. I think if it's okay, I'll sort of throw in a little anecdote that I wanted to share in terms of, one of the important tips that I learned. I remember reading an interview. So I worked in Moscow for many years, and one of the well-known lawyers there was interviewed, and I was reading what he said, and they asked him a question. If you could go back, and when you were starting off as a junior lawyer, what was the advice you would give yourself? And he said, learn how to shut up. And I think the importance of that is learning how to listen. Mm-hmm. And I had a great sort of learning experience in that regard. I was representing a client, and the other side, these two guys, the principal negotiators, were best friends for years. Okay, like 20, 30 years. They grew up together. And so my client said to me, this guy, let's call him Bob, said, Bob's my best friend. And I'm worried that I'm going to get all caught up in this negotiation. I'm going to start yelling at him. So what you got to do is you got to get me to shut up. Okay. So we'd go in and we'd have all sorts of proposals, and we'd have some clauses in the agreement that we didn't think they'd ever accept. And so sure enough, we'd be going through the document, and Bob would say, he'd say, look, guys, come on, this clause, it's ridiculous. I've never seen anything like this. There's no way we're ever going to accept this. And we just kept quiet. And he kept talking. And as he kept talking, he'd say, this is crazy. Okay, I understand what you want. And we really can't agree to that, but here's what we can do. And our negotiation strategy became, let Bob talk. And he would eventually, not always, but he would talk his way into the position that we wanted, at least partially. And when we thought we'd get nothing out of it, we got something, and sometimes a lot. And so sometimes the best strategy is to just keep quiet and let the other side talk. Because it's true, Sam, what you were saying about people being uncomfortable with silence. And when they're silenced, they think, well, I got to say something. Mm-hmm. And it takes great self-restraint to just sit tight and let the other side think about it. There's no question about it. And we have a lot of tools that we use, that help our clients to do things more efficiently, to tackle all this information that can be overwhelming if you don't have technology and some of the solutions it offers. But I think what's interesting, and following on what Tim was saying, even if it's only that 5% that's left, that can make all the difference. It can be the 1%. The 1% can be the difference between, an okay deal and a good deal, or a good deal and a great deal. And I certainly also agree. I hope there's always that 5%, 2%, or something, because life is going to be really boring if Well, what I was going to say, I was going to go back to a couple things that both Tim and Nina said earlier, talking about preparation, and also talking about making sure your team is all on the same page. And I know it's easier said than done, especially when you're dealing with people from different generations. I mean, I'm not as young as some of my coworkers, and they've grown up in a very different environment where technology was always a big part of their life. But I think it's very important to make sure that everyone is coming from the same understanding of how things are going to progress. And so, again, when I think about preparation, it's sitting the team down and making sure everyone understands how things are going to work and getting everyone on the same page. I mean, when I think of, two of the sort of highest pressure and highest profile negotiations I did were very different in many ways, but there was one big similarity, and that was the fact that on our side, we had a very small team. There were basically 4 of us. And on the other side, they had about 20 people. And it was just very funny to see, again, talking about sitting there and listening. We would sit there and watch them sort of all argue amongst themselves, and everyone wanted to say something to feel like they were relevant, et cetera. And you could tell they didn't take that time to coordinate. Whereas for us, we had a small team, and we knew exactly what our position was. Or if we didn't, it took us a minute to discuss it and figure it out. And so, again, goes back to preparation and making sure everyone's on the same page. And again, it can be challenging, but that's also part of the magic of getting a good team, I suppose. Well, I was going to say, and again, I was going to say, repeating some of the themes we discussed earlier, sort of slow down, listen. But since we want to add something new, I'm going to follow up on what Tim said. And we talked about technology and sort of automating the negotiation process. Humor, and also just generally keeping it human. When I was a younger lawyer, I probably wasn't the friendliest negotiator. I thought my job was to go in there and just tear apart the other side. And with time and with experience, I learned that's not the most effective way. And not only can I think you have a more effective result if you learn to listen to the other side and treat them with respect, it makes life a lot more fun. I mean, if you're stuck in a negotiating room for 8, 10, 12 hours, do you really want to be antagonistic with the other side? It makes life a lot easier if you can try to be friendly and figure out what each other wants.
Thank you very much.